Why do we even need an intro? Let's just do this! Alright, so here it is. Another great weekend, and I hope you have really enjoyed it. This time I'm bringing you an old character, a 10-year-old character which was abandoned on my hard drive. So I decided to take her and stylize it with the new shader style that we've been working on with the Guilty Gear Stylized shaders. We are also going to work with the abnormal add-on for Blender. So let's start. 50 tips for stylized characters. Everyone knows that good topology is a must to get real good animation. But in anime, all we care is about this green and red line. If you get those right, then you're halfway through. And also the eyebrows and the eyes. It's very important. The rest of the body, of course, has to have good topology. Otherwise, it will not work for animation. So let's just start by reviewing this character right here. It's going to be a long video, so I really want to take my time to show you each one of these tips. Tip number 1, you can smooth vertices whenever you have hard edges or hard modeled or very dislocated vertices by entering edit mode, right click and smooth vertices. It will look like if you have applied a subsurface modifier to it. Next, we're going to talk about proportions. As you can see here, we can modulate or create a better model by deleting half of the model and then working with a mirror modifier. Okay, so whatever you do on the left side, it's going to be mirrored onto the right side. Many people prefer to work from the right side to the left side. So in this case, we're just going to do this mirror, and now we're going to use the pivot to move the arms because we want to pose her in an A pose. I'm going really fast with this. You can put pause later in the video. And the way you do that, it's by going into this upper hand menu and then selecting vertices, because in this case we want to position our 3D cursor specifically snapped onto the vertices. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to select my 3D cursor, I'm going to activate my snapping tool, and now I'm going to single click one of those vertices where I want the axis to be. In this case, the 3D cursor has been placed correctly, and now I'm going to lasso select all of my vertices by pressing one vertex select and then Control and left click to make the lasso. And now I'm going to use the pivot as the center to rotate, and then I'm going to turn off the snapping tool. I'm going to switch on the rotate tool, and as you can see, sure enough, we have the power to move this accordingly. I'm going to hover the white circle. You can turn on overlays and trigger your cursor in case you don't see it in your interface. And now I'm rotating this because of the axis of the cursor. And I think this is just about right. Perfect. Tip number 4, use the 3D cursor pivot as a pose for an A pose character. So that's what we're going with. We're posing this character so we can later on rig it. And tip number 5, we're going to use the sculpt tools, smooth and slide relax. Two of the brushes that are mainly used to relax mesh. Whenever you have hard edges again or rough edges, you can use the smooth tool brush in the sculpt panel. Also, you have this slide vertex tool as well. So what it does is that you can grab an angle, stroke, and then it will follow that stroke to relax the vertices. So here we go. We have this model and we really want to apply again, right click, smooth vertices, and then you will get a very smooth surface. That's what we want. Tip number 6, check the local and global orientation. It's very important that whenever you select multiple objects, please make sure that you're working in global transformations. Okay, so you go and fix that right up here. So now I'm going to press G and then press Z to move this all constraint in the Z up axis. Tip number 7, use annotation tools for proportions. Whenever you're drawing your 3D character for stylization, you should have some kind of visual help, and the annotation tool is the right tool for that. So you just grab here from the view menu, from the end panel, and then you can name your layers. And of course, we want to do a rough sketch right here. We can change colors because what we want is to locate the correct and appropriate positions for the knee. Tip number 8, proportional tool and fall-off types. Since we're going to be moving a lot of vertices, we want to move them proportionally. So you can do that with the proportional tool that you have right here. You have different profiles to do these angles be sharp or be smooth, to be smooth. All right. Please also notice the lower part, the lower right part of the screen where I have the key combinations for everything I'm doing here, so you can pause the video. Because if I was to do this at a regular pacing, this will take around the 6 hours that it originally took me to port this model from Softimage to Blender. Tip number 9, stylizing shapes with lattices. This one is a very important one. Whenever you're working with already defined shapes, you can continue to stylize size and volume in general using lattices. So Shift A, add a lattice. You can then go into the properties of that lattice and raise up the UV subdivisions that you can use for your lattice so that it can manipulate the segments of the mesh that you're going to apply it to. So I'm selecting the shoes right here. I'm going to add a modifier, and then with the picker, I'm going to pick the lattice that we just positioned and subdivided. Then I select the lattice, and then I go into the edit mode. Now you can see the vertices. Yes, lattices have vertices here in Blender. So then you can continue to use the tools for transforming those points. Tip number 10, decimate your models. Whenever you bring something from another package or another DCC or maybe a downloaded model, it should happen that sometimes it's got too many polygons. You can use the decimate modifier, and you can use pair numbers like 4, 2, 6, and that way you can check out how the decimation is going to work for your polygon models. And also you can apply a subsurface modifier on top of that to smooth it out. Tip number 11, one body to rule them all. Please, this is something I see very often. Whenever you're working with a mesh, try to make it as a whole body, a single mesh, okay? Because if you have different parts, you're gonna have to deal with weight later on into the pipeline, and then the model is going to break. So whenever you're working, this might be some common practice with many artists. But if you don't know, please make your mesh a single body mesh. Tip number 12, snap vertices and automatic weld. This one is a must used for everyone who's working with Blender and is wanting to know or how do you weld vertices with one another. First of all, this one works in pair with the snapping tools, and we're going to select the vertices as snap targets. So you activate this and you have the options right here. And now you can just move them, and then they will automatically snap on. And that's what we want. As you notice, the average normals activates immediately between them both. And you can also see, let me see if I can turn the normals on. From this menu, from the overlay menu, in the edit mode, you will see these options. So now, if you join them, you can see automatically the normal averages between their neighbors. We're going to be talking a lot about normals later on in the video, so this step is crucial. So please pay attention into what buttons we are activating in the interface. Alright, tip number 13, activate edit preferences add-on, the F2 mesh add-on. This one is very important. I work with this all the time. For example, if you have two different meshes, one single mesh, but separated by holes, you can just select both vertices and then press F2. It will automatically fill the faces, the polygonal faces that they are missing. All right, so that's what I'm going to do here. And then, of course, you can continue to manipulate the vertices, and then you have one single mesh. Tip number 14, parameters when you press F9. Whenever you create a torus, a square, a box, you can continue to see the parameterization by pressing F9. You will get an additional menu, and then they will work. Tip number 16, use grease pencil to generate curves. This is very useful for hair and later on sculpting that hair. So I'm going to create a grease pencil object right now, okay? And now I'm going to enter into the draw mode, because depending on the context, Blender works with different modes and between different data sets. This is too long explanation, technical explanation. Just so you can know, just select the grease pencil object, enter into the draw mode, and now we're going to create a new material, an outline material in this case, and I'm going to rename it just so I can know what we're working with. And now I'm going to activate the snapping to surface tools right here. So whatever stroke I draw, I'm gonna get it snapped into the 3D volume. This is very important. This is a very important feature that you can use. So I'm going to draw this just as a quick example, and as you can see, the hair automatically sticks. Okay. So now let's sculpt it. While you're still on grease pencil object selection, you can press tab again and go into sculpt mode. And now you can continue to refine or smooth your lines right here. And the strength of the brush to do that, you can move it right there as well. And this is just a quick example. I'm not going to be using this. I'm just showing you how you can do this. Tip number 17. Now you can convert those same grease pencil strokes into objects by going into Object, Convert to Curves. And from there on, please select the curve in the outliner. This will give you new properties. And inside those properties, you're going to look for geometry. Right here, I'm selecting the curve. Now I'm going to go into this property. And now I'm going to go into geometry. And from there on, you can tweak these numbers, as you can see right here. And they will give you thickness, they will give you shapes, they will give you a profile to work with, okay? You can also move the subdivisions and also other parameters that will help your hair look more natural. Tip number 18, use the blob brush to inflate your mesh. So you can use this, for example, for tight muscles or bigger muscles. In this case, the legs, the back side of the legs, and the thighs. Of course, you can work with that as well. Tip number 19, name your collection, mesh, materials, and texture in exact same way. If you use the same name across all of these different data levels, then it's easier for you and the software to show you the results you're looking for when you're identifying a specific part of this character. So in my case, I'm creating a texture with her name, a material with her name, and now I am picking her texture correctly. Tip number 20, UV seams. You need to copy them from real life cloth seams. Like you can go and check out your pants or your shirt or your sweater, and you will see seams that they are done naturally to sew the cloth in a very specialized manner. So in the same way, when you're working with UV seams, you can press Ctrl E while you're in edit mode, and you can then select from the edges the seam. It will only appear Ctrl E for edges, okay? So in that selection, I'm picking this side of the hand and also to the rest of the body as if she was wearing a sweater and sweatpants. And of course, tip number 21, we need to atlas or join together or put together in one single UV space this kind of arrangements for the UVs. Okay, this is important. Now we have UDEMs, we can work with that. And I wanted to mention that whenever you're clicking this little button here, that is synchronization mode. Whenever you're in synchronized mode, you can select islands, but if you are not, then you can select individual vertices and then also polygon faces. So this is very important. So how does it work? When you click on it, you need to select on the viewport your mesh, and then you can manipulate your UVs over here depending on the filter selection. For example, individual vertices or individual islands. But if you are on the other mode, then you will only manipulate connected islands. Tip number 22, you can straighten align vertices. You can select them and then press S X and 0 in the numpad, then enter to confirm. This will allow you to align vertically all of the vertices that you have selected. And this way you can then press G and start grabbing them and move them restrictively in the X axis. So that would be G and then press X. And then you can start move your mouse. It's a very elegant solution to start manipulating these UVs. You can do the same by aligning them horizontally. With the tip number 32, straighten the X aligned vertices by selecting them and then press S, Y, and then 0, enter in your numpad. Yes, Blender feels all the time like if you were chatting with someone else. You need to know where the keyboard combination buttons are, but this will get you moving much quicker in your work. So let's just fast forward this, because it's very important that all the UVs are correctly distributed and aligned. Many people has asked me, Mr. Schiller, how do we make those kind of texture UVs that Guilty Gear has? Why are they so squared? How do they make them so square? Well, they do the same that I'm doing here, which is taking every vertices, opening up the UV space, and then rearranging them in such manner that all of them are blocks, except for, I think, the face. It's the only one, yeah, I think the face is the only thing that they remain like in a single block island. But the rest of the mesh, they are straightly aligned like I'm showing you right here. And that's the reason why we probably don't or can't identify what they are in the UV space, because they have already created this distribution, this atlas, and of course we're replicating that here into Blender. The idea here is to have everything perfectly and evenly distributed so we can get a much better solution at the time of painting, like you saw right there. That this one is the neck, for example, and then I need to align the continuous UVs from one space to the other, from one island to the other. So I'm going to select this, and just like I mentioned before, you need to switch from the synchronized version into the viewport, and now you can move those vertices, move those islands freely. So right now, if you select this, see, they both get selected, and that's not what you want. What you want is to switch selection mode, unsynchronize that, okay, like this, unsynchronized, and now you're going to select those to see where you are, and now you can click freely. And we saw that is this line corresponding. Now, that was very obvious, but I just wanted to do it so that you can put pause on the video, check out what buttons I'm pressing, and then you can move them. Because just like I mentioned before, if I was going to explain this step by step, this will take too much time. So you can put pause on the video and then go back into what I did press. And you can also read down here in the lower right part of the screen all of the keyboard combinations I am doing. So I'm going to fast forward this again, and I am continuing to distribute the UV spaces, the UV islands, and of course the vertices, because we want to scale this. Okay, so tip number 34, reproject the leftover vertices in edit mode, UV unwrap, project from view. So the way it works, sometimes you receive a model, and I'm going to be in front view by pressing 1 in the numpad. And from there, I'm going to enter with the U shortcut, the unwrap menu, and now I'm going to select project from view. And what that does is that whatever you have on the view, it's going to be projected the same way in the UV space. So see right here, it's projected exactly the way I was looking into the viewport. So now I'm going to grab all of these vertices, and then I'm going to press SX-1, enter in the numpad for the next step, And what we want to do here is to correctly align both of the eyelashes so that they can share the same UV space. And we do that because we want to optimize what we're going to do later on. When we do something on one side or paint something in one side, it's going to be automatically painted into the other side. That's how we optimize the UV atlas. Okay, tip number 35, paint texture mode in 3D and 2D. Probably you knew this, but we can paint in Blender both in the 3D viewport and in the 2D UV layout, which is the UV paint. As you can see the icons right here. You have different options all throughout where the little arrows are pointing, because different spaces, just like I mentioned before, have different contexts, and those contexts bring new tools and new options, such as this brush right here, which is going to be my main brush for all this session here in the painting, in the UV painting workspace. So I switched modes. I'm not into the edit vertex mode anymore. I am into the paint textures mode, and then I'm going to paint also here in the 2D viewport. And just like the arrows showed you, you need to be in paint mode here on the UV paint. Otherwise, you're only going to see the vertices, and that's it, and you will not be able to paint them. But you need to switch from UV space to paint, and that way you can correctly paint your space. So let's just forward this pretty fast. I think this is times 50. And this is a complete video that took me around 6 hours to make and port my model from Softimage to Blender. If you right click on your viewport with your stylus, in the case you're using a stylus, you can have quick access to your color palette, your modes, your zooms, your blending modes, of course, in the brush, and also textures and many other options that are very useful, so you don't have to switch workspaces around. You can get them right from your right click with your stylus. So in my case, I'm going to delete this line, so I'm going to invoke the color palette, and now I'm going to select my color, the one that I was painting with before, and I can switch back to the hair color and continue to paint. Isn't that useful? So you can have the entire maximized workspace, and you can continue to work very easily with your stylus. Right now I'm completing this project with my stylus, so in the case you have a digital screen, you can also paint it in there. Blender picks up very nicely the tilt and pressure sensitivity, so it's just amazing to work with Blender in this mode. And just like I was mentioning before, you can either paint on the 3D viewport or on the 2D UV paint workspace screen, or workspace window is what I meant. So I'm just stylizing the hair right here. I'm just drawing kind of braids, and now let's work in the mouth. So I'm applying an orange base for the lips, and after that I'm painting with a lighter yellow color. And now I'm going to draw the outlines, well, the inner lines actually, for the ear. Let's go for the shirt. And you can detect with the vertices activated, with the geometry showing wireframes on top of your model, so you can know where the vertices are, and then you can paint them in the UV paint space. You have different interaction brushes such as line, dots, airbrush, space, and different settings for your brush to stamp. Okay, you can also stamp on the 2D UV paint window. So I'm stylizing her pants. As you can see, the older version, the 10-year-old version, sounded good at the time, because in the movie she's going to be running into a seashore. But in this part of the design, I decided, let's just modernize those sweatpants. And now let's set up the real-time neon glow shader. I posted this picture in my social accounts, and many people asked me how is it possible to create an emission shader while you paint it. So we're going to create a new image from right here, image, new image, and we're going to give it a name. Okay, let's name this like emission texture or something like this, something that you can recognize. And we're going to use a black solid color as the background for the image because we don't need any color. Okay, we don't need alpha, so uncheck that as well. And now we're going to press OK, and this is going to create our image, but this image is not saved in the disk, in the hard disk, so we need to save that. Okay, so right before that, let's go here into the shader tree, Shift A, let's add an image node, and now of course we need to save this so we can use that into the image node that we just created. So you just save that image, and now you can locate it from the image node. That was very easy. Next, what we need to do is to connect these two using a mix shader node, and then I'm going to use the color that we're going to paint as the emission color directly connected into the factor, so that way we can test this out first. So I'm going to draw a stroke by selecting a pink color, and of course it's there, but it's not glowing. What we need to do is to activate bloom options in the EEVEE renderer properties, and of course raise up, let's say to 35 here on the emission parameter. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is that you need to paint in the appropriate map, because once you stack up images, they are going to be shown stacked up here in the UV painting layers. Okay, so I'm going to connect my original textures which was the pants, and now I'm going to connect the emission shader, and then I'm going to mix it and activate the appropriate map to paint. Okay, so this is all good. Scroll up here on your properties. Let's make this very spacey now. Okay, I'm going to change this. I need a neon glow here, and I'm going to undo that because it's not saving it on the right slot. So right now I selected the emission slot and of course my color, and now you should get immediate results here on the texture. So picking up your slots, your image paint slots, it's very important, and also saving your image after painting is also crucial. So that's why you have a big button right there to save it, to save the images, or just press Alt S. So I'm going to continue and design this new kind of neon punk pants, you can say so. It's cargo tactics pants, I don't know how to call them, but they sure look cool. And now of course you can set up whatever color you need and make sure that they work harmoniously. For example, if I'm using this purple color, I know the complementary color for this would be either an orange or a yellowish color. So right now I'm going to first paint the pinkish color, and of course I'm switching between maps because you can paint your regular map by switching the slot or changing into the neon glow map, and of course picking up the color. So press this button often, save all images, because you're working with multi-level images at this moment here in Blender, but here's the result. And now I'm going to use the factor to drive either shader to show in the viewport. So that's amazing. So if I turn it down, then my texture is going down, and this is the exact effect that we expect whenever we are working with neon cloth, okay, effects. You know, the lights go off and then the neon glow goes up. I'm sorry. Okay, so this image node is reflecting whatever you have on the UV paint, as you saw on that red arrow. So make sure you're working everything accordingly. So we continue to paint here on this slot, right here, on a neon slot, emissive, texture. Now I'm going to select yellow, just like we mentioned before, because it's a complementary color and it works well with neon pink. And it's fantastic. Perfect. Now I'm going to continue to select another color, yet another color, and draw these kind of a stylish UI icons. Okay, so here's our character. Tip number 36. Finally, let's get into the basic toon shading. If you've missed all the previous parts for the Stylized Guilty Gear series, this one is going to put you in the map. We're going to work into a basic toon shading model, stylized shading model. And as you can see, we had two different approaches for the textures. The ones that were straightened and the ones that were not, like the hands. So it doesn't matter right now because we're not going to work with inner lines. We're just going to show you the basics of the toon shading technique, especially since Blender 283 has been released just past some days ago. So what we're going to do first is to define our threshold, or the shader that will react to the light. And for that we need a diffuse shader, and now we're going to pick up a shader to RGB to transform those physical properties into single colors. And then we're going to ramp those colors, or we're going to limit or threshold them using a ramp node. Okay, I'm going to create a new light. This is going to be a sun light, and now I'm going to use 5 as the energy. I'm also going to change some of the parameters that we have here for the shadows, because I wanted to show you this. If you activate shadows and then you are playing with the threshold of the shadow, you can play from 0 to 1. Probably sometimes when you need the shadows to be very, very harsh, you can drive this parameter. Otherwise, leave it alone. I mean, this is one place where many people pitfalls because of the shading in the light. All right, so let's go back into the ramp shader, and now we're going to change it from interpolation to constant. And from there on, we're going to add a subdivision modifier so that all the normals, as you can see here, can get much smoother. Okay, tip number 37, select the frame node and then press F2 to rename it. I know these are very basic things, but trust me, you really need to identify your stuff in the shader tree. So right now I'm going to press F2, and then I'm going to name this physical reaction to light. And then I'm going to grab all of these nodes and then Control P to parent them with the frame. And what that's going to do, it's going to organize and identify what we're doing. So now that we have a shader reacting correctly into the light, we need to apply the textures or the flat materials. Okay, so we're going to take the original UV coordinates, and then we're going to plug it in here into the texture. And what I want to do here is to tint the texture. How am I going to do that? I'm going to use a mix RGB node. Why? Because just like Photoshop, whenever you have an original color and then you use the tint option, then you can do that, of course, here in Blender by using the blending mode. So the first slot is going to be the texture, and the second slot is going to be the color that we're going to be using to multiply it or overlay it. In my case, I like to use not mix but overlay. Or you could go, to some other color and just originally use the multiply option. Like this one, for example, it looks good on overlay. So once I have that, I have my shadow color. Now I need to multiply it against my lighter color. That is to be understood, my original color texture. Okay, please get it together, put pause on the video, go slow because I know I'm going very fast. Because I really want you to get this tip. Number 38, the blending modes like screen, multiply, overlay reside on the mix RGB node. That's the only thing that you are going to need to make operations here creatively with color in Blender. So how does this all tied up together? Well, it happens so that the physical reaction to the light, it's the factor threshold. This is a so much sought factor threshold that will define how much of the ramp is going to affect your character. This is the physical reaction to light. All other styles, all other textures are there just to be flat, just to be not dynamic. The only dynamic thing that we're going to get here is the factor threshold that you see right here. That's why I named it this way. So right now I'm going to connect the light and the dark textures, but who's going to determine where one ends and where does the other begins? The light factor threshold. You can see it right there, and it's working perfectly. So now we are mixing in the first slot and the second slot, and we still get this result. That's the shadow is inverted. So what we need to do here really is to switch the order in the factor threshold. Let's do that. I'm going to grab this here, and then I'm going to switch the black onto the other side. So the threshold right here will define how the light will paint itself over the surface. So let's switch that here in the ramp threshold, and as you can see now it correctly displays the shadow to the back of the character and the light to the front. And that is exactly the light direction that we have. This is very basic. You can get this with other maps, like in the ILM map, the glossiness map, and the shadow, of course, on the blue channel. And then you can arrange this differently so you can get tinting, okay, in different ranges of light on hue values. All right, so this is getting cool. So the next step that we want to do, as you can see right here, is to add the emission shader that we previously had. So please don't forget, we have this right here, and I already showed you how you can connect that, and we connected it to a diffuse node. But right now, the only part that we need from this shader is just the emission node. So we're going to duplicate that, and then we're going to connect it into a mixed shader node, because we're working with physical reactions, not at shader level, okay? So Blender uses physical reactions for light attributes, which basically means whatever the shader tells the tree to do, that's going to be mixed with a factor. So I'm going to favor the factor probably around here, so you can see the difference. And now we can see in additive mode, because that's the way Blender works. When you use a mixed shader, it works in additive mode. Tip number 41, editing normals with the BNPR or AB normal. It is called AB normal, okay? And you can download this from the BNPR website, of course, and they have a GitHub, so you can download this amazing add-on. I have this gizmo because I forgot to turn off my rotate tool in the main layout, in the main object mode. So let's retract all of these menus because we want to read them properly one by one, okay? So we have an entire shortcut list here on the right side. You can read them. Please do read them because they are very useful for your workflow to be completed. And tip number 2, while you're using the AB normal, use the C circle select and confirm that selection using the right mouse button. So right now we're going to select the face, specific points of the face, okay? Because we want to modify those normals. This is very easy because right now, as you can see, there is a purple square around all my viewport, which means I am in a specific session for example, change the vertex size using the AB normal modifier. Tip number 44, show only selected normals, otherwise you will go crazy and you only need to work with the ones that you're going to select. So by circle selecting them, sure enough, you can see all of the normals being displayed. And these are the normals that we want to change, okay? So select them patiently. This video is fast forward like around 10x. So this is only half of the face because we're going to show another very useful feature for the AB normal plugin. So right now I'm picking all of these vertices, or rather normal, and now we're going to work by switching them to the global axis align. This is done automatically. You don't have to do anything except pressing the button that you have right here to align the vertices. As you can see, all of the normals have been correctly aligned into the Z forward positive space. Tip number 46. Now we want to mirror them, so you can press this button right here and they will automatically mirror onto the other side of the face. You don't see it right now, but if you select one of the vertices, automatically you will see that the normals from the right side have been transferred over to the left side, and you can see them all right here. I'm going to show all of the normals and you can see some of them. Tip number 47, create forced shadows by turning your normals vectors downwards. What I want to do here is to select all of my neck vertices and also the under the jaw, all of those vertices under the jaw, and then make them forcefully point downwards. Okay, that way, whenever I move the light, it will not get affected unless the light is completely hitting those faces or those polygons directly from below, and that is not going to happen. You know, the light is always at 45 degrees with 45-degree angles with anime, and that's not going to happen. So right now, if you press right here in the negative Y, you're going to get all of your normals pointing down. This is perfect. This is exactly what we needed, and it's working perfectly. You can see it right here. So what this means is that whenever the light hits there, they will not get illuminated. Now what we need to do is to learn how to use the average normals. So I'm going to select this single normal right here, and then I'm going to press average. What it's going to do is going to look at the neighbors, and then it's going to be automatically aligned, as you can see right here. Isn't this marvelous? It's taking in acquaintance all of the neighbors around, and then when you press average normals, it will average it at a 5-degree angle. So if you press it again, it will be 5 more, and that will be a 10-degree angle from the average of the neighbors. And let's try this right here. See? Again, they will get average. And why do you want to do this? So that the light will get distributed accordingly. And tip number 49, the most important one, please click confirm changes button. This is very important. So you exit the session, and now you can go into edit mode, and let's see if the normals are still preserved, and indeed they are. Look at this. It's a beauty. And tip number 15, just practice, practice, and practice. Okay, I'm using Blender's theme where you can have your counter hours. This was an 11-year-old project, and now I took it into Blender, and in only 6 hours, and mostly because I had to repaint and reproject some things, I ported my character from one DCC to the other one. So let's practice. Yes, indeed. Now let's recreate the shader for the head. In this example, I'm creating the light threshold. We already explained it. And now we're going to activate this is smooth normals. I'm sorry, the subsurface. I'm sorry, the subdivision modifier to make smoother normals. Okay, and that's just amazing. Look at that. Without any textures or without any materials, the mesh by itself with the modified normals is reacting marvelously to the light. This is a sunlight, by the way. You already saw that on the video. So right now I'm going to rename this because we need to practice what we preach. And I'm going to select this blue color. Please also use always the blue color to identify the light threshold. Okay, just hear me out on that one. So let's create our multiplied or tinted shadow. In this case, I'm using a purple color. That's the color I like to multiply my shadows with. And now I'm going to combine the original color of the texture with that shadow into a mix RGB node used in overlay or multiply mode. And then in that same mix RGB node, mix RGB, I'm going to be using the factor threshold. So here I have the light, here's my mix RGB, and sure enough, I'm connecting my light texture and my dark texture, my shadow texture. And now I'm going to use the light threshold as the factor. Marvelous. And now I'm going to connect that into a emission shader. And sure enough, I have my face reacting to the light, but we need to switch around the factor threshold. It's right there. I mean, there's no science on this. The way that it's shown on the Stylized series is very easy to follow. And if you have not had the chance go get part 1, part 2, and part 3 recently came out. So you can go more into more details about how you can create a further stylized shader. But with this, you're on your way and it's working straight out of the box. And that's just marvelous. So you can continue here checking the model, and of course, if you make your world dark, then you can check out how the neon glow works. And tip number 51, the outline. Of course, we would not have a toon shader if we didn't have the outline. So let's just do that. I'm going to activate this modifier, the solidify modifier, and then I'm going to check flip normals, of course, and then I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to select the facial material already, and then I'm going to duplicate it by pressing this button right here. I'm going to rename it outline, and that's material number 1. That's why we offsetted the material on the modifier, on the outline modifier. Next, I'm going to switch the emission, turn down to 0.2 probably to make it darker, and then I'm going to make this a +1 because I want it to the outside. I want to fatten the outline, and sure enough, you can see it there. She's very kind of chubby. And in the shader properties, I'm going to activate back face culling, which will block whatever back face is showing. From there on, I'm going to play with the thickness, as you can see right here. Of course, you can put pause, check out the video, step by step, frame by frame, everything is there. Tip number 51, of course, it's about the outline or the back face cull. And from there on, you can see we have different options to affect the shader. Affect the mesh. And what I want to do now is to create a vertex group which will receive fully in 100% influence the modifier, and another special group which will not receive the modifier. I have previously set up this I group, which you can see right here, and my vertex group has a weight slider down here. That means I can assignate the modifier to affect that region to 100%. If it's not affecting anything, it will turn blue. That is 0% or 0 weight. Okay? And if you go back to edit mode, you're going to get this panel. And now I'm going to select the entire face, and then I'm going to assign it to a 100%, okay, vertex right here. Then I click assign, and now I'm going to go into wake paint, and you can see the entire face is red because it's 100%. And now I'm going to go back into edit mode again, and now I'm going to reassign 0 values. That is where I don't want the outline to be. In this case, specifically in this case, I'm going to exclude the eyebrows. By selecting them, I'm coming here to the menu, selection, select similar polygon faces. You can select the other side as well. So you can select one, and then the other one is automatically selected. And when you have both, then now you can play with the weight. And now I'm going to assign a 0 weight, which means I will not affect these eyebrows. And the other thing that I will not like to affect it's the lips. So I'm going to select the lips. I'm going to fast forward this even more. So quickly with circle selection, press C and then press escape in this mode. You can quickly select your polygon faces. So right now I'm going to again assignate a 0 weight value here and then click assign. And from there on, I'm going to go back into my modifier. I'm going to select my vertex group, and sure enough, you'll see that you do not have this outline on the eyelashes or the lips. So that's the way it works. You create a group and then you assign 0 weights where you do not want this to be modified. Perfectly, it's working now. Look at that, marvelous. I'm really happy for you, and I hope you can subscribe to my channel. And please don't forget that we have different tabs here. Of course, I revamped the channel, so now you can come in and check out the playlist where I am grouping all of these videos, because someone asked me, whatever you do in different subjects, I don't know if you do Blender, if you do Softimage, if you do text reuse, well, you have them all grouped here in the playlist. So please don't forget to check each one of those playlists. I even have a time-lapse playlist for 3D works, which is very interesting as well, and full workflow for Blender production. that is happening right now. And of course, if you click here, you have all of my videos and you can check them out individually if you want. And thank you very much for your support. Please don't forget to subscribe, to support my Patreon if you would like to learn even more. And of course, my Gumroad store. So I hope you can check out also the community tab where I also post my latest news and things regarding this channel. Thank you so much, and I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. Wow, time really flies. Time really goes by. See you in the next video. Bye.